Yes, questions.
Paul's got his hand up.
Right. We've been involved in some projects in Africa, or looking to get involved in some. And often the great difficulty is finding a reliable Rotary club on the ground to help manage the project, especially with a global grant. What would you say? How would you characterize the Rotary clubs in this region?
Well, it's interesting. I can't generalize, okay, but I can comment on two of them. There are two clubs in Bukoba. Bukoba is maybe 40,000 people, despite the central marketplace looking a little shabby by our standards. The club that we have partnered with, as I said, I've known the president my whole time. He runs his own computer business. There's a number of entrepreneurs in the club. It's a new club. They've never done a global grant before, but man, are they enthusiastic and committed. And listen, the Rotary systems, the vicissitudes of trying to get a global grant going over the past 3 years have been just horrendously frustrating. And I am really taken by how they have persisted, because I have not interfaced directly with the region's grant reviewers over there. So I have the great good fortune to have identified a club with leadership that I know and trust. Now, I started off being recommended to another club in Bukoba, and when I dug into that, it turned out they had screwed up about 3 global grants and had not managed things well at all. And so even though they had a number of global grants under their belt, my personal digging around and pestering people in the Rotary hierarchy over there, eventually I got them to admit that no, I should not partner with that established club that had a track record. So I know it's a rare circumstance that somebody like me has spent, 15 years on and off doing various projects in Africa and know people on the ground. But my only comment is you got to do your due diligence with various people in the Rotary hierarchy. Make sure you're not just talking to somebody who, Rotarians never like to say a bad thing about each other. Everybody's drunk too much of the Rotary Kool-Aid. And many people have drunk too much of the Rotary Kool-Aid and aren't prepared to be honestly, constructively critical. I've run into that too often in my time. So that's the only way that and it's a common sense comment, but that's the only way that I can think of to, minimize the risk of getting involved with a third-rate organization. But listen, I got to say, even more important than that, in my opinion, it's like an 80-20 thing. Yes, the Rotary Club, you need a good Rotary Club, but really, what active role does the Rotary Club play in the implementation of any global grant? And I've been involved and I'm aware of a number of grants in Central America that have been going on for many years. And the answer is not so much. Yes, they monitor progress by having periodic meetings. Yes, they have to manage all the finances. Yes, they have to put the reports together. But the stuff, in my opinion, the real world stuff that really matters is almost all done by the cooperating organization. So in my opinion, it's way more important to have an NGO that you really know and trust. And I am so fortunate to have that in the Kolping Society. And also it's an enthusiastic, good Rotary club, but I would say, maybe I'd even say 90-10. You can get in a bind if the host club doesn't submit reports in a timely fashion and stuff like that. But that's, it's important, but it's administrative stuff. The project on the ground will get screwed up if you don't have a really excellent cooperating organization. Anyway, there you go. There's some thoughts. Go for it, John.
Okay, I have a quick question. How far away and from where do they get the manure?
Very interesting question. So initially, we thought, not just me, but we thought, both Jerry and I thought we were going to have to go to ranches that are about 100 kilometers away. And then 80% of the cost of the manure is trucking. And it's essentially a waste product out of these ranches because, there's not a general appreciation of its value. So we had rolled that cost into the project. And then I was sort of aware that it's a mixed society with some pastoralist people with, 20 cows here and there and whatever. And it turned out that when Jerry and her team actually dug into it, we were able to source all the manure from these smaller pastoralists that graze on open lands within a relatively short distance of the village. And what was really cool about that, heretofore, that was really a wasted product. The cows just poop out in the countryside and it's gone. They've changed their practices to where they've gathered the cattle together at night and they eat during the day and defecate at night. And so they now have a stream of income which did not exist before, totally separate from the core purposes of the project. Now, over the last 15 years, there has been a growing general awareness of the value of manure. And so the prices have gone up, but a very, very perceptive question, John. That's the way, that's what's happened with us in that.
Thank you.
About the fact that what a wonderful project is, so just amazing what you've done. But you mentioned earlier, and this is always a big thing with Rotary, is the lack of potable water in the area. Is that what you're going to talk about, Alan? And it's, is there anything that can be done about that? I mean, not to divert away from your project, but that is so key to people's health and well-being.
It is, and I am not a WASH person, even though I've been dragged in as a cadre advisor in this thing in Haiti. I did talk about this subject with people in Tanzania many years ago, and what I was told was that it was hard rock drilling as opposed to sedimentary soil drilling, and so it was very problematic. But it's something I have to look into because basically, I'm familiar with, say, 10 different villages, and if there's no water wells anywhere, now they boil the water and this kind of thing. People, it's interesting because, the community needs assessment. The process is supposed to be, we go to the community and we ask them, what are their priorities and what do they need? We don't a priori say, oh, they must need water and go in and provide water. And water was not top of the list. These people are so poor and, kids regularly die of malaria. They didn't bring up the issue of waterborne diseases and cholera and all that. It was about, I need $5 to get my kid to the hospital and get his malaria medicine and this kind of thing. So I can't really answer the question, but because of what I've been exposed to in the last couple of months in Haiti, I'm going to be clarifying, enhancing my understanding of that issue when I go back to Tanzania, which I think will be later this year when we finally get this thing approved. We're moving ahead. Good question. Don't have a good answer.
Alicia?
Yeah, that was just an amazing presentation. Really enjoyed that. You mentioned a woman farmer. So how many women farmers were attending and loving the coffee crops? Okay,
so interestingly, Tanzania has law, unlike a lot of other African countries, has a law that women can inherit the farm when the husband dies. Okay, now this doesn't always get followed. There are some really crappy stories about women who've been kicked out by their brothers-in-law, but 20% of the farms, of the small holdings, are owned and completely operated and owned by women who are generally widows. And there's a really interesting dynamic that's happened here pre the coffee project. First of all, the men saw so little reward from working on their coffee plants that they did little with them. And the women have responsibility for raising the kids and providing food. So it was the women who got lumbered with an awful lot of the farming work. A very, very inequitable split of responsibilities and labor. With the coffee project, we insist, or not, I shouldn't say we, remember the heavy lifting's been done by the NGO, not me. I brought the ideas. I've provided some nudges and some strategic suggestions, but they're the ones who know. They're the ones who are trusted. And women and men attend all of the same training, the basic financial training to deal with the SACCOs, and have savings and borrowing for the first time ever. And so what has happened is when the men have seen the coffee plants actually can be massively increase their cash flow, they're engaged in the farming process, and the women have migrated to a marketing and financial management side. And so they have a much larger profile on the domestic scene than they did in the past. And we also insist, well, we target for half of call them the directors of the project, be women. So their public presence and their private responsibilities and presence in the domestic scene. This is some of the things that I hadn't really understood or anticipated. Jerry knew, but didn't really understand. So that's the long answer to your question about women's role.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Alan Dunlop still that's the last question, and then I'll ask the question, and then we've got to go on. Alan?
Thank you very much. I was curious, there's that picture there of all the people sitting on the ground. You can see the power lines in the trees behind them. What's the source of the power?
You know, I've never noticed that. And are you talking about the one from 15 years ago or the one from October 2019 where there were 300 people there?
Gee whiz, just the one you showed us, they looked like there were maybe 150 people there.
Well, so we were in, these aren't really villages. It's 300 individual little farms, and there tends to be a really grotty pothole dirt road where there's a few little sheds for their marketing stuff. And I guess there must be, in general, there's no power generally to any of the farms. That would have been a power line. Probably most of the power is from Uganda, not from Tanzania, because we're much closer to Uganda than we are to the core of Tanzania. So to the extent there's power lines, which I've never noticed and nobody else has commented on, it's coming in from Uganda, but it is very, very limited. Essentially, it's a non-existent commodity for all the people we're dealing with. If it's a power line, it's going into a couple of shops in what they would call their high street.
Okay, well, thank you.
I'm gonna go back and look at the pictures to make sure after this presentation, because that's cool that you brought it up, Al.
I also saw the power lines and I thought it was that power or telephone. Anyway, I want to just make a few comments. The one is that I'm super impressed that you and people like you and Rotary are moving in the direction of sustainability. As we had our previous speaker last week told us about the hand up and not the hand out, and the fact that you do the consultation with the community as to what their needs are, I think that is just incredible. I would just like to, my own personal little thing is, we recently heard about coffee plantations being very bad for birds, especially in South America, where they raise the ground and start new plantations. So the older plantations and the plantations that are being supported is actually excellent habitat for birds. And there is a new program worldwide that's bird-friendly coffee, which I think is even more important than organic coffee. So do you have any knowledge of that? Do you plan to implement that? Have you?
So really, really interesting point. Yeah, I think there's a rainforest coalition or something. As a sidebar, one of the projects that I helped put together in Zanzibar was a fellow who was in the butterfly business, shipping butterflies around the world, and in consulting with other people, butterfly pupae, I mean, and consulting with various people in the business, which I didn't even know there was a business. Costa Rica has replanted significant areas of rainforest for the sole purpose of enhancing the butterfly export business. So it does happen. Now, with our guys in Tanzania, these are people who have maybe a half an acre to an acre of land, which is planted in food crops, and there are mostly, well, the banana trees and beans and that, and the maybe the average shamba is maybe 50 coffee plants, and it's intercropped with banana trees and other food crops. So I would say there's not really an opportunity and probably not a need to do that in the area that we are looking at. Yeah, no, I could be wrong on that, but it's not on our agenda right now, because I mean, plantations for the landsman strip is a whole totally different ball of wax from a whole bunch of half-acre subsistence farmer food producing areas. So hopefully the banana trees support some bird life, but quite honestly, I can't recall.